Hey, everybody. Welcome to the green room for DisrupTV. We got some amazing guests today. And of course, some of you have seen before. I'm going to introduce them. They're going to be introduced in a certain order, but we'll do it in reverse. And of course, we always ask people where they're coming in from and what are they talking about today. So we'll start with Dr. David Bray. Where are you coming in from? What are we talking about?
Coming to you live from a rainy Washington, D.C. today, and looking to talk about how AI, and recognizing everyone's talking about AI, but more importantly, how we need to do AI in a way that is people-centered and community-centered, and how VCs as well as governments can work together to make this happen.
Very, very cool. We're looking forward to it. Miriam Vogel, welcome. Tell us a little bit of where you're coming from and what are you talking about today?
Great to be here with you. I'm also in a rainy DC day here and looking forward to talking with you about why boards, why senior executives all need to be thinking about responsible AI governance.
Very, very good. Timely topic. And Teresa, Carlson, welcome. Tell us where you're coming in from. What are we talking about today? Are you telling me DC as well?
Well, I'm just going to say, unfortunately or fortunately, you have the DC contingency today. And so, yes, I'm also coming in from, and everybody's talking about DC, so it's a topic, right? It's a good time to be here. I am going to talk about really kind of anything you want, but my favorite topics are innovation, transformation with startups, how they work in the government sector, especially in the world of AI, and how that's changing the way that people and governments can work and really change their mission in a positive way.
Well, hey, we're really excited to have you on. And of course, we're going to get some brain power from DC, of course, and then we'll take it off from here. So back to you, Elle. We're going to kick off the show. And of course, look for the links on Twitter and of course, repeat that as everybody gets out there. So see you guys soon.
All right, 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar. I'm the Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce and your co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us on X at DisrupTV Show. Send Ray, myself, our distinguished guests your questions, and we'll try to answer them live. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Ray Wang. He's the CEO and founder of Constellation Research. He's the best-selling book author of Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I see Ray on TV just about every day. Fox Business, Yahoo Finance, Bloomberg, CNBC. In my humble opinion, he's one of the top futurists to follow on X at RWNG0. Welcome, Ray Wang, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot. We have my amazing co-host, Vala Afshar. He is the Chief Digital Evangelist for Salesforce. He's also the author of multiple books, including Boundless, A New Mindset for Unlimited Business Success, and a #1 seller on Amazon. Get yours today. Executives around the world pay attention to every one of his inspirational and insightful tweets. He is flying all over the world, hosting, keynoting, leading events for Salesforce, and you can also find him speaking on business TV outlets such as Bloomberg and posting insightful analyses on ZDNet. But as we say, it's not about us. It's about our amazing guests that are here. And who do we have to kick it off from the Brain Trust out in DC?
Ray, this is going to be an awesome show. And we have all our guests in a panel format. So please allow me to introduce all three guests before we ask our questions and have our conversations. Our first guest, Miriam Vogel, is the president and CEO of Equal AI, a nonprofit created to reduce bias and other harm in AI and promote responsible AI governance. Miriam also serves as the chair of the National AI Advisory Committee, mandated by Congress to advise the President and White House on AI policy. Miriam previously served as the Associate Deputy Attorney General at the U.S. Department of Justice. Miriam also served in the White House in 2 administrations, including as the acting Director of Justice and Regulatory Affairs. Miriam also co-hosts a podcast, In AI We Trust, and has taught technology, law, and policy at Georgetown University Law Center, where she serves as the chair of the alumni board. Miriam will provide us with perspective on AI, responsible governance, and what governments are thinking about regarding AI. Welcome, Miriam, to DisrupTV.
So great to be with you both, with all of you.
Thank you so much.
Hey, welcome.
This is Teresa Carlson's second time on DisrupTV, so thankfully we earned the right to speak with her again, as she continues to be an incredible, impressive individual with multiple leadership roles in the private sector. Teresa currently is a full-time advisor to the VC firm General Catalyst, and previously was executive in residence of Microsoft Corporation, president and chief growth officer at Splunk, and vice president of Amazon Web Services, where she founded and led worldwide public sector and industries for more than a decade. Teresa's bringing in the perspective of a venture capitalist and private sector investor into all AI efforts. Welcome back, Teresa, to DisrupTV.
It's so great to be here and just great on these topics. And I love my other two panelists. So it's so great to be on a panel with people you love and respect.
That's awesome. I love my co-host. So, and thank you again for coming back. Dr. David Bray, there's only two people that have been on DisrupTV more than Dr. David Bray, and it's Ray and I. Dr. David Bray has been on Disrupt for more than 25 times. On Saturday Night Live, after 5 episodes, you get your own jacket. So you clearly have earned a DisrupTV.
We're going to get some DisrupTV jackets made.
Dr. Bray continues to be a champion of positive change agents, hashtag change agents across the world. Business Insider named Dr. Bray as one of the top 24 Americans who are changing the world. And he was named a Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum. He's received both Joint Civilian Service Accommodation Award, National Intelligence Exceptional Achievement Medal for leadership in challenging times. David brings a perspective of someone who's led in turbulent environments and will highlight what we should be tracking with regards to how generative AI might be used to disrupt either legitimate governments or private sector activities. Welcome back, first ballot Hall of Famer to DisrupTV, Dr. David Bray.
Thank you, Vala and Ray, and I will say the same thing. I love both Miriam and Teresa, and I love the fact that actually we are showing true cooperation and collaboration, not just in DC, but across the country.
Yeah, it's very, very important, right? We've got Boston, Silicon Valley here, all tech centers, DC, a tech center as well, all represented. And so some great questions. And, what other topic is hotter than AI at the moment? And of course, everyone is talking about this. So let's talk about, I'll start with you, Miriam. Why did governments as well as company boards need pragmatic AI leadership? And what is Equal AI doing to address concerns of bias and need for responsible AI governance? This is going to be one of the top questions we're going to be asking, not just now, but for decades. So Miriam, share with us your insights.
Well, thank you for this great question. And I'm so glad you included, Ray. It's governments and industry alike. I mean, that's the fun thing with AI. We all have a role. Organizations, anyone using AI needs to think about what it means to be a responsible actor. And that should mean all of us. It was interesting. I was just talking with somebody at a call center today who is telling me, I haven't used AI today. And I said, really? You haven't used Netflix? You haven't used Spotify? And we went through all the ways. And she said, oh my gosh, I'm an AI user. That's so exciting. We're all AI users. We all need to know what it means to be responsible, particularly those who have the levers to make sure that the AI we're using is trustworthy. It's not going away. As you said, we're going to have this conversation for decades to come. And the hard thing is we're building the infrastructure now to make sure that, and we need to make sure that we are building AI systems that will be safe, will be trustworthy, will be able to verify it. We need to make sure there are mechanisms in place so that we can be able to have testing and we need documentation in place now to ensure that down the road, all the users across the globe who touch that AI understand for whom was it built, for whom was it tested, and for who could it not be safe, because they're not in those first two categories. And at the end of the day, it's going to be industry that are going to have key levers here, and it's going to be government that need to standardize best practices and understand what we all need to understand what it is that we're using. We need global consensus on definitions so that when we are using an AI system, when we're licensing, deploying an AI system, we can all have the same standard terms and know what has been tested and when. Particularly important now where there are not clear international frameworks. We have, and I know we'll talk about more today, many beginnings of international frameworks, and we have many laws currently on the books that are applicable to AI, but it's not clear. There's not one rule book you can follow when you're buying, deploying, developing AI. And so that's why it's so important that industry, society, government alike dive in and make sure that we're aligned on what the priorities are and what the standards should be for anyone deploying, developing, using AI.
Miriam, that's a really good point, right? I mean, we haven't had a worldwide conversation about it. It's just been thrust at us, and we're dealing with the implications. Teresa, David, anything else you want to add to that? So, Teresa, I'll start with you.
Well, I so agree with Miriam. I think we're kind of in this new world order, and all executives are really grappling with how do they both absorb artificial intelligence at their business level, business or mission if you're in government, and also how do they work with their teams? How do they work with their employees to make sure, number one, they understand how to use it, ethical ways to use it, training and education of it. So we have all these work streams that we've got to get in front of. And I can't remember who just said it, but this has happened so quickly. In my old world of cloud computing, it felt like that came along a little bit more slowly. With AI, it's just really taken off. So now we have not only on top of cloud computing and digitization capabilities that are required, you have AI capabilities in the transformation of that. So we've really added a lot on to our enterprises and our executives on how they deal with it. Now, I think we can get there, and it's also a good forcing function for us as well. Like it's kind of, forcing everybody to get going, to understand this. And I'll turn it to Dr. David because he has some of the most prolific work actually that I've seen in this area. He talks about it a lot. So just keep looking at his stuff on LinkedIn.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So, David, all you.
Well, humble. Thank you, Teresa. And I'm going to amplify both what Miriam and Teresa said, which is not only is this being thrust to us on the world stage, where not only have countries not reached agreement as to how to do this, and they're sorting this out, but then similarly, enterprises have different value propositions associated with this. There are several companies, obviously, that are ready to absorb data and absorb what AI is going to present. But there's also some that are still trying to get the data fundamentals right, let alone thinking about AI. And what I've been trying to say, both to governments as well as to companies, is let the business case lead the way, not let the AI lead the way. I mean, I know it's always exciting about AI, and I realize we're here to talk about it, but in some respects, there's a very real risk that companies or organizations or even governments will deploy AI as a technology without first thinking about the business case. And I think that's what makes it particularly hard for governments like ours, in the sense that we are a free and open society where we allow people to have different thoughts, different perspectives, and different opinions. The challenge is we're going to have to figure out how do we roll out services that have AI behind the scenes and helping to make it happen in a way that recognizes that what they may want in some parts of Texas versus some parts of California versus some parts of New York, it may differ. And so in some respects, we may even need to rethink what does constituent engagement look like for government agencies, and then similarly for companies. In the past, it was more of a sort of like you interacted with your customers and there was a relationship built, but it was back and forth. Now, in some respects, the data that your customers or clients bring, in some respects, it's their voice. And if you don't respect that data and respect what that data is being stewarded as, in some respects, you might actually lose those customers or clients to another company that does a better job. And so it's actually rewriting the rules of business simultaneous to rewriting the rules of government, and doing so all across the world simultaneously.
I think it's important that you reference data. The latest research from Gartner reveals that less than 4% of companies have data that's ready to be consumed by the language models. The data is not tagged, it's not enriched, it's not ethically governed, it's not tested for biases, it doesn't have the security and scale requirements that are needed. And most of the enterprise software applications reside in silos. So the data sharing is very limited. So you have inaccurate data, and all AI projects begin as data projects, as we all know.
Can I
Miriam,
just say something about that real quickly?
please,
Are
please.
any of us surprised about that, though?
No.
I know, I
No.
love that Gartner says it, but I know Miriam and David and I have been living in the world for 20 plus years, all of us. And you talked about it in big enterprises and governments. This has been an issue forever because they amass so much data all the time, every day, and then they kind of store it here and there,
Right.
and they're constantly rejiggering priorities of projects. Every time you have a new president or a new secretary, you have a reprioritization. And the data structure has never, we've slowly seen that improve, but it's slowly. And again, I'll go back to forcing function. I think they are getting a real forcing function because they're going to be left behind if they can't use AI capabilities.
That's great input. And we all know data has a shelf life. At some point, it's not really useful. So not only you're in silos, but you're decaying in value.
But I'm with you then, but I would also say, even though we recognize on one level data has a shelf life, I don't know if organizations, be they government or for-profit, are letting go of old data and have a way to appropriately actually ensure that it's gone. And if anything, I kind of feel like we need to unlearn the lessons of the last decade where we somehow had this metaphor of data is the new oil. And I'm like, oil, use it up, it's gone. Data, use it, it's still there. And actually, if you involve the very people or communities associated with the data, they're actually going to correct it. They're going to actually find more value in it. They're going to actually create more data. And so it's almost like we have to unlearn the metaphor of data is the new oil and come up with something better. And it's probably going to involve some way of whether it's data cooperatives or data communities. I'm going to be curious as to which company pioneers that approach first, because I realize there's some companies that are still, there's a lot of companies that have their bottom line right now riding on the old model. But I think those that are willing to disrupt it, and that's why I love what you all do, the ones that will disrupt it, I'm interested in those that will pioneer a better way of involving communities.
I tend to view data as water. It's essential for life. It needs to be clean. It needs to be affordable and accessible. I'm reminded the Earth's surface, 72% is water, 28% land. But of that 72%, only 1% of water is safe to drink. So when I think about the data, and of course, 2 years from now, the surface of Earth will still hopefully be 72% water. I know I'm aware of the climate crisis that we're in. With data, we're projecting doubling of the volume in the next 2 years. So this year we should cross 200 zettabytes. And I know Dr. David and I, that's 21
3
zeros.
times the amount of human conversations ever had as a species.
1 trillion gigabytes of data stored and accessed this year. I'm geeking out. Sorry, the engineer in me is
and the external alien will be tuning us out after listening to all that stuff.
I'm curious, Miriam, talk to us about Equal AI. What is Equal AI doing to address concern with biases, inaccuracies, and this AI revolution that we're all part of?
Well, I love the analogy of water because too often people are feeling alienated from AI. There's some people who feel like they're going to own it, and the rest of us, everybody else who's a little intimidated. They're worried about what their place is going to be in an AI world. And so that's really a big focus for us at Equal AI. We try to make sure that AI is equitable, that it is inclusive, that more people, more communities can benefit from it. We talk about AI being an opportunity for more people to benefit, to be healthier, to have personalized education. We're net positive, we're AI net positive, and we believe that AI can overall create so much betterment for society. It can help with the climate crisis, but only if we are very intentional at this moment to make sure that we do better, to make sure that we're using it in appropriate ways to help our climate crisis instead of just creating more carbon waste and using energy, depleting our energy. If we're making sure that more people can be seen and heard from our AI, so that they can make sure that if they're using it in the healthcare space, that it's actually benefiting them and not the nightmare situation where there's some doctor or physician's assistant who's presenting a false negative because that patient has not been adequately represented in the data, back to data, and the physician and all of the medical technicians involved have no idea that patient could be underrepresented in the data, let alone the patient themselves. So at Equal AI, we work with business leaders, we work with policymakers to make sure they understand their role in making AI inclusive, safe, fair, effective. We work with senior executives. We have a really fun program, a badge program for senior executives where we have 7 sessions to align on best practices on responsible AI governance. We have some, of those who created this field, like Kathy O'Neill, who wrote Weapons of Mass Destruction, teach how to do algorithmic auditing. We have Microsoft and Google DeepMind, Salesforce showing us at Salesforce how, with your impressive systems you have in place, how you make sure that there's responsible AI governance and how you help your clients. And so those in our program get to benefit from the deep thought that has been put in. And then we talk with policymakers, we talk with lawyers, really divide it into different lenses so that those in these positions of power can understand how to lead responsibly. On the flip side, we have programs for policymakers. They really want to hear from those creating these technologies. And so there's a fun synergy between the different constituencies we work with. And on the policy side, they want to hear what is actually happening in the trenches. What does it look like to create AI responsibly? What are the challenges you actually have where government can serve a role and not disrupt innovation in a bad way? How can we promote healthy innovation? What is the role of guardrails? And we have programs where we have showcasing companies who are doing this well. We have a demo day with responsible AI governance, so you can see what it looks like in the wild when companies are really doing this well. Because as you know, that can often be too far from Washington. And so we want to make sure that innovation from across the globe is here, and we want to make sure we're learning from innovation across the globe, really building a community.
That's awesome. Salesforce is proud to be an active community member of Equal AI. Kathy Baxter, who leads our AI research, is an active member. So we're learning a ton, and we appreciate your guidance.
Well, thank you. Sorry.
No, I mean, it's amazing, and it's great to see industry and government and other groups and nonprofits collaborate. I think it's important, right? This is a societal kind of collaboration. It's important, right? As we look at policies, what our values are, how they'll get reflected in some of those rules and rights, and that's one end of the spectrum on this AI policy debate. But the other end of the spectrum is something that David and we've been talking about for a while as well, which is really this notion of all the misinformation and disinformation that's about to be created. Like every technology out there, like you can use it for good or you can use it for bad. But here we have an amazing ability to actually create some misinformation, disinformation at a scale we've never seen before. And so, David, what are governments and companies doing? What do they need to be ready for this? Because these cyber attacks look really wimpy.
Oh yeah, well, so you hit the nail on the head, Ray. That this is not happening in a vacuum. Before ChatGPT even showed up on the scene about 2 years ago, we were already in a period of what I would call gray zone conflict, in which certain nation states were basically, having ways of causing disruption, polarization, dismay, and despair, and disgust within their societies as a way of sort of influence. And we should recognize that, again, nations influencing what's going on inside of other nations has been around ever since, even when the United States was created, even after Revolutionary War. Our friends, the UK, occasionally would interfere with what our perceptions were and our information channels were. And leading up to the Civil War, there's evidence that the UK at the time was actually influencing. They wanted to see secession happen and things like that. And that's our friends. And so, in some respects, it's nothing new. But now with the interconnectedness of the internet, hat tip to Vint Cerf, who I know is a friend of all of ours, but also with AI, we are now connected more than ever with the ability to create realistic looking but completely inauthentic content and put it online. And so this is something that's impacting companies. Your brand can, someone can create something that looks like your brand was associated with something that's completely not the case. But it can also happen for governments. It can happen in the public space. I am part of a group that does track as nonpartisans how elections around the world might be messed with. And we've seen already search engine manipulation. So basically you are elevating to the top of search engine results things that are completely untrue, but you're doing it using generative AI where you create 15,000 web pages, each slightly different. You have them all point at the same search result. And it's hard for that search engine to now distinguish whether that was a human-made page or a bot-made page because they are so authentic looking. And since it points all to the same search result, search engines that were built on the idea that if more people are pointing to it, it must be more authoritative, put that to the top when in fact it's not. And so in some respects, the system's operating as intended, it's just being manipulated. And so I think what we're going to need to be thinking about, especially in free societies, because I've been briefing the UK, I've been briefing the US, Canada, and other governments, we're going to have to look to solutions in the private sector, because free societies cannot come out and start determining what is truth, what is not truth, what is accurate, what is not accurate, because that's a slippery slope to censorship and worse.
Yes.
But that's going to require private sector actors, and that's where I actually am going to turn it now to Teresa, which is what are the roles that maybe VCs and investors can do to incentivize the creation of private sector solutions that help people triangulate and make sense? Because we know the president has 15,000 analysts through the CIA that do this they do this on a daily basis. They create the presidential daily brief. And even then they give confidence intervals as to what really is going on and what's not going on. Most people don't have access to that, or 15,000 analysts. So we really need to have competitions to see what the private sector can do, either to have ways of assessing accurate content as being more authentic or not, but then also helping people triangulate what's going on in the world.
And I can give you one example. At Salesforce, we're scoring language models. The language models are getting updated on a weekly basis. The specific ask of the language models, whether it's sales related, marketing, e-commerce or service, will have different levels of accuracy. So there's general purpose scoring and then specific use cases. So you have to be active, because there are so many routes to the wrong information that exist today, given the various models. So there's a Yelpification effort. That's just my word, not Salesforce, in terms of scoring accuracy, in terms of the language models that are used. But Teresa, please follow up with, why are VCs excited about generative AI? And given your incredible success you've had in the private sector and government, what guidance you can provide to business leaders who are going to lean into AI to help improve their products and services?
Well, we did, thanks, David, we did talk about that scary part, and there is a lot for sure. We know that. I'll talk just for a minute about the more exciting part. And I think even in the exciting part of generative AI, we always have to use a risk-based model. We have to be thoughtful on cybersecurity efforts that are happening with this. And technology is evolving and changing at a rate and speed that none of us would have ever predicted. So this is why it gets harder and harder, and we need technologies that actually are able to catch all this much faster. But on the venture capital side, I have to tell you, it's a very exciting time for investing in technology. I feel like we have a whole renaissance here again of entrepreneurs and leaders, and even, I'll say, smaller technology companies and startups, but also even in the large tech, you're seeing them be much more creative. And of course, they're all also vying, wanting all the startups and entrepreneurs to use their technology, which is kind of interesting, right? They want to be out in front with all those new startups and entrepreneurs, because there's so many companies being created. And for a minute, I'd like to talk about kind of what we talk about at General Catalyst as global resilience and the new world order. And things have changed so much from the geopolitical stage that if you think about how that's really being defined by the great power of competition now, and really increased nationalism. And there's a transition happening that's going to be enormous consequences for the global economy, because this new environment has really created a time when governments and countries are kind of still looking at national ability to create their own tech and make sure they have sovereignty around that, because of a variety of reasons. The issues that we're facing at war right now that's happening, the issues that we see at the government level with China that are talked about. You're seeing companies and governments kind of go a little bit more inward again. And this is actually, believe it or not, though, causing unbelievable technology creation at a scale of innovation like I've never seen, though. I mean, very moving fast. I was in Europe a couple of weeks ago. I met with like 30 of our startups, and it was really interesting because they are really seeing the impact of the AI acts that are coming out. And I heard the biggest, I don't want to say fear, because they're moving fast. I don't want to call it fear, but they're trying to figure out, how do I grow and move my business out much faster? And a lot of them said, we want to be here in Europe. We want to be where we're at home, right? But we're actually going into the US because we're getting our business is moving much faster in the US because we don't have all of these regulations, and because of the European regulation being right now, people are not sure how it's going to go directionally, and there's a lot of onerous stuff in there. And now in the US, we're seeing different AI acts kind of pop up. You have California, you have Colorado. The US, we'll see what happens. We have the executive order that President Biden put out. If we have a new president, we'll see a totally different EO, I'm sure, for AI. So right now in the US, there's kind of almost, I'll call a pause. It's a lot of conversation. Miriam is doing amazing work trying to actually give direction and good guidance, but in terms of what's really out there and being passed and guidance, it's really kind of on a pause. But from a venture capital company, when you're investing, you take advantage of all that, right? You just say, let's move fast, but let's do it in a way that makes sense too. I don't think any of us, we want to invest in companies at General Catalyst that provide societal change in a good way. So when we look at companies, we are in defense, intelligence, manufacturing, energy, financial services, supply chain, but we really do look at founders and companies where we say, are they going to build technology that we can all get behind and say, we love this, it'll outlive all of us, and we're going to say we love what it's doing. But at the same time, we want them to move fast in a responsible way and take advantage of that. And I'll just say one last point that I made on our last show. When you work with governments and regulated industries, no matter what, if you're a smaller startup to a much larger company, you got to do that in collaboration with government. You got to make sure that you're working with them, you understand, and give them feedback along the way. And that's the reason it's important to have dialogues like this so government can hear and understand what's really required. But in terms of the investing front, it's huge. It's so exciting right now, you all. We were just talking earlier, the number of companies we're seeing, it's mind-blowing. And they're all based on what David just said, use cases, real world use cases. And when you see that kind of transformation, you want to get on board and invest.
Teresa, I think one of the most important things right now is really, we know who the picks and shovels are going to come from. We know where they're coming from. But the excitement area, as you're looking at investments, where in the investment theses do you have companies that are applying AI to create something different? Because we think that's going to be the difference as we move from picks and shovels to, here's the infrastructure, to here's the applications, to here's how people are actually incorporating it into their businesses. Are there certain theses that you're seeing that kind of stand out more than others?
I am seeing some amazing work. I mean, some you all even know about. If you think about companies in the defense sector, I'll say right now, Anduril, they are moving so fast. There's a new 100 NatSec list out right now, and it's a good and a bad list. The good is we have a lot of great companies on there, but there's still not enough. There's still not enough government funding moving into the mission programs. But you're seeing companies like, Anduril come in and build really systems and move really fast. The other company I love right now, they're a total European company, is Helsing. And they are doing great work across Europe, in the Ukraine, and doing it at scale with AI. It's super transformative in warfighting capabilities, and we need that. The work Anduril's done in drones is quite amazing. Another company is called Brink. I love Brink. They're a U.S. only drone company. I'm a big fan of the founder. He's young and exciting, but he's 100% making the drones in the U.S. And I don't know if this is a stat I'll throw out there, but 89% of all police departments in the U.S. still use Chinese drones. And it's important to have American made, just like we talked about, there is nationalism and sovereignty. And from that perspective, we need to make sure that we are manufacturing and making things in all the countries. You want to do it wherever you are, India, Europe, and in the US, we need drones because they're warfighting capabilities. They have 100% US made drones doing super transformative work within the public sector space. We have so many, but another one I'll just say in the healthcare space I love is around healthcare. Hippocratic AI is doing work actually with patients where they are using AI capabilities to have conversations with just to understand conversationally what's going on day to day in their life. And guess what? They remember where we don't remember every day, every conversation. AI remembers, and they're getting unbelievable results and data on this from the patients that they're talking to in their clinical studies. So everything from across, healthcare to defense, legal. There's also a lot of legal. I think legal is going to be an area that will be super disruptive, because if you think a lot of their stuff is billed by the hour, types of individuals that do it. And a lot of that stuff can be automated. I don't know about you guys. I've thrown a few things into Anthropic and Chat GPT already to see what it looks like. It's pretty good.
Pretty good. It is pretty good.
I know that while Teresa is sharing these really exciting developments, I would argue she's also really making the case for responsible AI governance, because obviously if you're talking about healthcare, there's no room for error. If you're talking about Hippocratic AI and other areas where we know there's problems with facial recognition, we know there's more problems with audio recognition. It cannot hear female tones as well as men. It cannot hear certain dialects. It can, most of them have been trained on English, and if you don't have a certain dialect of English speaking speaker, it's going to have trouble hearing you, let alone if you have a speech impediment. And so there you see, not only could your AI be ineffective and harmful to the user, which nobody wants, but you've also brought up liability, because the EEOC in the US has partnered with DOJ in joint historic statements to say, we want you to realize that what you're doing could have civil rights implications. It doesn't matter that you didn't know, and it doesn't matter that you didn't build it. If you are using it, you are liable. And right there, we just talked about a potential ADA violation, because if you have a speech impediment, you can't be heard, you're harmed. That is a harm under the ADA. I mean, obviously, I'm speaking in very blatant terms, but it is certainly something you need to be mindful of. And so while we are innovating, while we're talking about, the EU AI Act, just this week announced another development, we're talking about the state of regulation with some uncertainty. It doesn't matter. There are laws on the books today that can and will be applied to AI. And so you want to make sure your AI is effective. Your employees want to make sure they're a part of an AI product that is useful and not harming people without meaning to be a useful product and having discriminatory or harmful impacts. No employee wants to be a part of that. You don't want your brand to be a part of that. And if you lost your brand integrity, if people don't believe that your AI is safe, how are you going to build that back? On the flip side, there's carrots in addition to the sticks. If you're building for a broader consumer base, you have more consumers who can benefit from your AI, who will be safe and effective consumers. So you build your base. But at the end of the day, I think what Teresa talked about, all of the use cases she mentioned, if you're not being mindful, you could be creating liability for yourself. And no board, no C-suite wants to be bringing that upon themselves.
And if I could amplify what Miriam
I think we both do want to.
Yeah.
I think we both do. So you go first, David.
All right, I'll go real quick, and then I'll turn. So I would say there's 3 real quick points. So there's a thing in the government, the United States government, called Section 504, which basically is asking for if something needs to be screen readable for someone that is visually has visual difficulties. And the challenge is when the early days of the World Wide Web were coming out, we were making sure that they could be actually read by people that needed to have different ways of doing it. But then when apps came out, and apps on your phone, all of a sudden the readability of apps just went downhill. It's dynamic web pages, dynamic apps are hard for people that have visual difficulty. And the challenge is now we're rolling out AI, and that too is facing a challenge of it's not readable by people that may have visual difficulties. But it's interesting, if you are a company with foresight and you're really thinking about AI as actually both something that's useful, but also making sure it's accessible to everybody, the very same things that you need to do to make sure it's accessible by people that may have visual difficulties also make it accessible to AI. So you actually get a 2-for-1 if you do this, and so that can help advance it. On the healthcare spot, I want to give a shout out to a nonprofit by the name of Health Level 7. They are the global nonprofit that actually manages health standards. I just want to share, because I realize no AI company right now is thinking about interoperability with other AI products, but here's why you should. If you are in the healthcare space, and right now the number one thing that's been shown why clinicians and physicians use generative AI is that they take their short notes and they write it up as 2 to 3 pages of results. And it's called pajama time. They do it at night after they've seen their patients, and it's called pajama time by doctors. The challenge, though, is if that output that has been generated by generative AI from those short bullets is now stored in your medical record and is later read by a different AI system, if it's running the same algorithm or the same model, you can do a thing that's called AI self-cannibalization or instability in the model. And so this is where, I care about AI interoperability, one, because I believe in free market, but then two, you don't want to ingest data that came from another AI system that's running the same model as yours, else it'll go off the rails. And we need to get ahead of that fast. And then finally, on the good news note, and this is actually amplifying what Teresa was saying, while we feel like things are getting faster and faster, and they probably are, we really actually need to recognize we've got quantum coming down the turnpike. We've got commercial satellite imagery coming down the turnpike. If anything, we should use what's going on with AI right now as an exercise in change management and just be ready for almost continuous change management for the decade ahead.
So agree. And one of the, I love, like we all got on Miriam, like, yeah, we want to make a point here. And another point here is that it is true. All these companies have to get on board. And my earlier point was this new world order and artificial intelligence is introducing new types of technology, innovation, and collaboration that needs to solve some of these problems. But simply put, these technologies and companies, in order for them to thrive in this new era, they're going to require more capital, more patience, more governance at greater levels. And what we are seeing, which I'm really proud of, all of the companies that I'm talking to so far care about all this stuff. They care. And they are already governed. What everybody should understand, there is already laws that govern a whole bunch of stuff. Without new AI regulation, there's already a bunch of laws out there. So if you think about healthcare, all of the healthcare companies that we've invested in all care about this. We've had calls. They want to get in front of the regulatory process. And even I'll say Hippocratic and others, they have physician panels. They're governed by the ways and process they do everything. And I love this. So they are, I think, developing very thoughtful, very responsible. And like I said, they want to drive societal change. If you talk about defense and intel in the US or Europe, guess what? They already have policies and regulatory processes. And in the US now, we have FedRAMP for AI. So they have to go through and pass the processes. Now, here's what I will say, though. It should not be a one-way door. We need to be looking at this stuff as a in and out, constantly evaluating it because of the level that it's changing. And we've got to make sure the people in the regulatory process, we're helping pull them along, educating them, making sure they understand. And Miriam is doing that. Dr. David is doing that. But I can't stress enough at every level of government, unless we in the commercial sector also are really from a policy and a regulatory perspective, helping them understand the good, the bad, the ugly, the pros and the cons of everything that's coming down the pike. It won't go as well as we would like. It could be too restrictive or not restrictive enough. And we got to really strike a balance here because we don't want to stamp out innovation. We want to let innovation move. And I think it's up to us, some of the things that David and Miriam was talking about, things on the Hill, things around the world, really spending the time to educate and train our world leaders on this stuff because it is moving at such a rate and scale. And like David said, it's not stopping. We're on to these other things quickly.
Absolutely. Certainly all CEOs that I have the privilege of collaborating with, AI is top of mind. I'm going to ask all three of you to put on your futurist hat with my question. But a little bit of history, because I know Dr. Bray is a historian. And then a use case that's close and near and dear to my heart. In the 1800s, the U.S. population at 1800 was about 5 million, and half the population were in agriculture. Fast forward to year 2000, 200 years later, population was north of 280 million, but only 2% in agriculture. So in 200 years, we were able to double the number of folks in agriculture from 2 million to close to 5 million, 2.5 to 5 million. But we were feeding 50 times more population, going from 5 million to 280. So a case could be made, technology eliminated 100 million jobs in agriculture in 200 years. And now we're thinking about the impact of AI. We're talking about automation, autonomy. Elon Musk is saying for every one human, there'll be 2 robots. So he's projecting, 16 billion robot population in his last company meeting that he had. He's super optimistic because the robot's about $20,000 a pop. So I don't know how we can afford 16 billion robots, but he's an optimist. We're all pragmatic optimists, I think. Now, my company, we started launching AI applications throughout Salesforce at the beginning of the year. We're up to 50 AI applications sprinkled throughout our company, with about 74,000 employees. So it was our IT department, our ethical and research AI council, and feedback from our employees across the lines of business. As of the last 90 days, we believe we have saved 50,000 man-hours of work. We've had 400,000 inquiries go to digital agents with better than 80% response rate without human intervention, closed cases. That's 25 man-years of savings in 90 days across only 50 applications. So there's evidence that there's incredible amount of efficiency and time back to our employees to do actual meaningful work. Our research also shows about 40% of the work we do is not quite as joyful and meaningful to the folks that are employed. So my question to you, take us a year or so from now, where do you see the impact of AI? Responsible, ethical AI, one that's not misguided, one that's not inaccurate, one that's actually providing value on jobs and how we think, because you're all advising boards and CEOs. What do we need to do to train our company, our people, to be productive in a world where we may be going from human-led, machine-assisted to machine-led, human-assisted? How do we operate? David, I'll start with you.
All right, I'll take that hand grenade. Here's what I would say is, in some respects, it's easier to talk about the long arc than it is about the short-term arc.
Yeah.
I would say ultimately where we're going to get to, we hope we get to, is as I actually say, the Turing test is a wrong test. A machine trying to deceive you into thinking it's human or not, that's not what we should be aiming for. Instead, we should be asking, how can we use these tools and technologies to uplift individuals and communities collectively? And I think that's where we hopefully get 30 or 40 years from now. And that's where I applaud what Miriam's doing with Equal AI. That's why I applaud what Teresa's doing with General Catalyst, because they're thinking about that end goal. I think the challenge is the short term, you run a very real risk that has happened in the past with most technological revolutions, where there's going to be people that have massive benefit and a lot of other people that are either left behind or they're frustrated or they're like, no one came to help me retrain. And it was actually near and dear to my heart because back in 2009, I actually made a nonpartisan pitch that said, look, we're going to have disruption. It's going to it's disproportionately going to impact certain parts of the country, including the heartland. Why don't we actually have a competition where anyone could write an app or a website that says, I'm currently X, I want to retrain to be Y. We could share NIST codes because our US government does have codes for the type of training necessary. And then it would actually look online for both community college offerings and online course offerings.
I love that.
Unfortunately, that wasn't pursued. But I think we
But
could
folks like Steve Case went around the country investing in
and I think that's what we're going to do
is,
one of the things that Teresa and I have really is you've got to have deployment empathy both for employees in your organization, because everything you just said, for most organizations, all your employees are hearing is, you don't need me anymore, which is not what you're saying. I know that's not what you're saying, but that's what they're going to hear. And that's also true for the country. And that's also why we see right now a almost anti-globalization backlash, is some people feel like they've been left behind because their perception is they've seen factories close, they've seen jobs leave and things like that. We've got to recognize that this is happening in a larger picture, where if you're in tech, you have a responsibility not only to roll out responsible tech, but also to be empathetic to the fact that, yes, you're asking people to do massive change. And while most of us in tech love change, not everybody loves change, especially if it's being done to them as opposed to with them. Right. And so what I would say for companies, what I would say for governments, what I would say for any organizations, find a way to involve people in the change processes and in the evolution of this, not just for AI, because as we just said, quantum's coming, space is coming, synthetic biology, personalized medicine's coming. We run the risk that we will have multiple tech revolutions happening that only benefit a few and not everybody, when in fact we really should be thinking about everybody.
Terrific.
No, definitely a great point there. What do you see, Miriam?
I was going to underscore exactly what David said. Axios was kind enough to profile our work last Friday, where we talked about just this point. People are afraid. People do not feel invited to the party, and we need them to be invited, because if not, then we're filling fulfilling what I think is the worst fear of AI, which is that most people don't benefit, which is that AI cannot hear and see and benefit most of us. On the flip side, if we engage more people, if we can invite them to the party, if we can show them that AI is something that can benefit them, not replace them, because I don't believe at the end of the day, most people will, as a fellow student of history, there's been for sure downsides in each revolutions, and there's certainly been harms, and people have been harmed, and there has been pain for sure. But on the other hand, there have been antibiotics developed, there have been innovations that all of us benefit from. And I don't think many of us would want to go back 100 years ago. And I think we're going to certainly say that about AI. It doesn't need to be 100 years from now, 5 years from now, based on the benefits that we can all enjoy and will all enjoy. But we have to have an invitation to the party, and that's through AI literacy. We have to make sure that our kids, my kids are told they're not allowed to use LLMs for their work. And so some kids, I understand at their school, sneak it, and it can't be something that is open only to those who are ignoring the rules. It has to be a part of our foundation. It has to be, here's the safe and best ways to use AI that is going to be a part of your world for sure in the short and long term. There was a study in October I thought was quite revealing that 74% of the 1,000 Americans surveyed said they knew very little or had no knowledge about generative AI tools, but 55% were very interested or somewhat interested in learning more about AI tools. If you tell someone, I want you to go try ChatGPT or any other LLM you have access to, I just want you to try it tonight. Ask it to write you a first draft. Ask it. The woman I mentioned earlier, Marcia at the call center today, who I had the privilege of speaking with, I said, just try it for a dinner party. Ask it what recipes it should be cooking for you, what you need to buy at the market, and to give you a playlist. Tell me what you think after you've used it. And she was so excited because she loves playlists, and there is a use for everybody. But what I also have shown my daughters when they were allowed to use it is that there's limits. It's not smarter than they are. It is really efficient and effective in some ways, and it can support them. It can't replace them. So part of the invitation to using AI is also understanding its limits and making sure that we have that critical thinking so that when we're looking and seeing things, I mean, you get back to the misinformation at scale. Yes, we need to be prepared. And again, get back to AI literacy, making sure our next gen, making sure our workforce, making sure our elderly. They're a huge consumer base over 75. We cannot forget that they need to be invited to this AI revolution as well. And we need to make sure that the tech that we're creating, it supports and works for them. I think there's a brilliant MIT study from the Age Lab about 4 years ago, which showed that most of the tech that was created for boomers failed. And why is that? Because most of it was marketed towards the elderly. It was products to help them in peril or with health emergencies. Well, they're 72% of the consumer base. And when surveyed, people over 75, under 20% thought of themselves as old, understandably. I mean, that is a vibrant population. And if we have this misunderstanding, first of all, we're missing out a huge consumer base, but we're also missing out on learning from a huge segment of our population that has the time and wherewithal to make sure that the AI we're using benefits all of us.
Miriam, that's a great point, and this is your AI net positive point that I think you made in Axios last week. So definitely an article worth checking out, very well written. Real quick, we're going to wrap it up. Miriam, Teresa, and David, let's talk about this. I get you 30 seconds. 2 years from now, we're all going to look back and realize that autocratic governments had a head start. It was a lot easier. All their data was in one place. They could force the standards, and there was no conversations that were required. Not that messy thing that happens in democracy. So what do we do? How would representative governments that were able to use GenAI in a different way uplift communities and companies alike? Will it look different? Will it be easier? Will it be harder? Is it going to be richer, less rich? What do you think is going to happen? I know 30 seconds is not enough, so I'll give you guys like a minute or two.
We have the competitive advantage. We have the communities available to help make sure that diverse populations, rural communities, diverse populations from across the world who live in our country are able to participate in AI. That is our secret weapon to make sure that we can build trust in our AI systems. We can do it in a way that demonstrates respect, that provides dignity, and that, again, can see and hear the majority of the users, the greater subset of our population.
Conformity versus diversity argument. We'll see how that plays out.
I'll say it comes down to I'm a big believer in training and education. My parents were teachers. I started my early career. I'm a chameleon, but I started my early career there. So I really believe the only country, believe it or not, I've really heard talking a lot about starting the understanding of AI at the earliest age is the UAE. They actually have already created a model where they said, we're going to train everybody at every level. And they have said AI is going to become our new oil. And I think that the thing that we're not talking about, Ray, I'll just say very quickly that we didn't really have the conversation today about is you really can't have AI unless you have energy, unless you have the chips. Yep. And you do have your data. You know, we can talk about it all day and we can theorize, but if we can't get our energy in check here. So if we move forward, what we really also have to do is be thinking disruptively and transformatively about how we provide energy and how energy changes in this country and around the world. And I think we can do it. We have the best labs in the world, the most creative engineers and scientists in the world. So one, we got to get all that in check. Two, we got to make sure we talked about let's get our data in order. And three, we've got to ensure that there is sovereignty for the United States and allies to have chips enough to actually do this work. Otherwise, we'll move a lot slower than we're predicting here on this call, right? It could just move a whole lot slower. And then for me, I'll just keep saying, if we're going to get this right, we have to have workers that are skilled. They have to understand it. Yep. And we've got to start this at a very early stage. I loved what Miriam said. We cannot fight this. The students in schools need to be, right now, today, they should be taught how to use this. So they're already fighting it. You can't fight it. They're going to use it for homework. Let's teach them how to effectively do it and responsibly do it.
David, last word on your
I'll try to bring it home. And I also want to give a shout out to Teresa, both as her parents were teachers, so were mine, but also as a teacher herself. I think that's so important to the world we're going into because we always have to be learning. But my guess is for 2 years from now, as to what we'll see. First, I think whatever happens in DC after November, I think we're going to see a push, I think, to actually do more AI efforts in partnership with the private sector between nonprofits and for-profits. The reality is the federal agencies, they don't have necessarily the entire technical capability to do it themselves, but through grants, through funding, through VC offerings, and especially if they incentivize that it's actually a VC partnering with a nonprofit, I think you're going to see different solutions in different states, which actually is the United States' strength, which is we are decentralized. And so that's one. Two, I think you're actually going to also see a reservist corps being pitched. I mean, it's been talked about for more than a decade. It's got bipartisan support. The reality is we know most of the best AI people, they can get really great salaries in the private sector. But if you give them something where maybe they're doing, 1 week in a month, or maybe they're coming in and doing 12 months before they rotate back to their job, maybe you're actually doing student debt forgiveness or something like that. And it's something that's for all ages, not just for young people. I think we're going to need to have a reservist corps to bring that talent in because it's probably going to be very rare. I mean, there will be some people that are like myself that are willing to go in for a while, like Miriam as well, that come in and do that government service. But I think a lot of the AI talent is going to be in the private sector, but maybe there's ways of incentivizing them to come in. And then three, finally, I think, again, this is not something where it's going to be one solution that fits monolithically the nation. And again, that's actually going to be the failing of autocracies. I think if instead we work with the private sector and the private sector gives solutions that used to be done by government, but is now being done by the private sector, but then also we recognize that we may have, again, with those nonprofits and universities at different states, I mean, we are the United States, 50 different states. And if we allow states to have different implementations, that diversity will actually be a strength because then the states will start to compare lessons. Governors will get together and say, I want what's going on in that state happening here. And you'll actually have sort of almost a market-like mechanism across the states themselves combined with the goodness in the private sector. So that's my hope.
That's amazing. Yeah, we are seeing a couple of things when we talk to our CEOs. The important things is where and when you insert a human is the question now, as people think about it, because you're not always as accurate and precise as you think. And so do you have enough data to get to a level of precision that your stakeholders will trust? And the third question is who's responsible when something goes wrong, or who do you sue when something's not working? So those are three questions that we keep hearing from a CEO.
Miriam's the lawyer, so maybe we'll come back another day. Although
That's
actually,
another
I also
episode.
pitch another one.
There'll be another episode for that.
We need to talk about authentic hardware. And so I want to give a shout out to another woman CEO of True North. We'll go in details later, but you actually have to validate your hardware because we may be building all this stuff on hardware that we can't.
Oh yeah. And so, yeah. So for those following around, definitely catch other episodes of Disrupt TV, but importantly, you're going to see us as well in our AI forum on September 23rd at the Harvard Club in New York City, where we're going to be recognizing the top AI 150 leaders, as well as having a conversation about what our rights might look like in a world of AI and digital. So, which Dr. David Bray will be leading as well. So, all right. So, hey, thanks a lot for being on the show. So,
thank you. Thanks for having us.
Teresa, Miriam,
we'll
you're
see you guys
amazing.
in the green room.
You're all amazing.
Thank
you
you
so much. Thank you for expanding our minds. Energy, data, governance, leadership, literacy. We covered so much in an hour. I will surely be watching this episode this weekend because there were too many wisdom nuggets that were dropped by our guest. Ray, would you like to summarize our conversation in 30 seconds?
I am not going to do any justice, but I'm going to give it a quick run. I know we're running out of time, but I think it's really important, right? I mean, we are seeing a need for AI leadership, and that's coming from all levels. And of course, there's this necessity of actually making sure it's inclusive, making sure that we do address concerns of what responsible AI means. We don't have standard taxonomies, and because we don't have standard taxonomies today, that conversation is going to be a little bit harder as we get around there. But there's a lot of excitement, and we're seeing public-private partnerships. We're seeing nonprofits, industry, and government working together. And I think there's a lot of hope there. And that's also leading to a lot of investment. And Teresa talked about the investment that VCs are excited about across different industries, across military tech, defense tech, healthcare. And of course, we're seeing it across all other areas of critical infrastructure. And of course, there's our issues. We have issues around external actors that could be playing bad roles. We didn't go deeply into the misinformation, disinformation space as much as we probably should have, and scared the bejesus out of everyone here. But the point being is there's a lot going on there. So I think it's going to be a very exciting space to watch. There's going to be competition between autocratic governments who can move very fast and, open governments and open societies that actually are going to have that hard conversation along the way, as well as the fractioning and of what's going on in politics around the world. So it's going to be a very interesting discussion. We're going to be seeing it here. This is not going away, folks. And we're going to be talking about the implications that have hit us over the next 10 to 12 years, not 10 to 12 months. How's that, Vala?
It's amazing. It's amazing. No, it is. The impact, it's real. You and I live in this space. We're seeing stunning productivity, efficiency, creativity gains as a result of the technology. It reminds me of Clay Christensen's famous comment in Innovator's Dilemma: you may hate gravity, but gravity doesn't care. Yeah. Substitute AI for gravity. This is top of mind for every business, every sector, every geography. So it's not going away. And it's our job as business leaders, as teachers, educators, to inspire, educate, instill confidence and trust, and do it in an ethical, responsible way. This is electricity for the 21st century. And if you're ignoring it, you're going to be left in the dark. So we just have to work together and do it in a meaningful, purposeful way, because it's real. It's real. Okay, what also is real is next week, our 370th episode of Disrupt TV. We have George Matthew, Managing Director of Insight Partners, joining us. And we have William Orai, author of Possible: How We Can Survive and Thrive in the Age of Conflict. Last year, we had 70 authors on Disrupt TV. I think we might cross 100 authors in this year. So if you're an author, this is where you come to talk about your findings and your research. If it's Friday, it's Disrupt TV. Thank you for watching us. We'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.